p.m. Alabama market. And if you remember our podcast, right? Just in case you haven't not seen the podcast, if you ever go back to the podcast that I did with Daisy Sebastian, we talked a lot about the different properties right here. This is the podcast. We talked a lot about the podcast that we went through and actually talked about the highs in demand markets for Section 8 properties. Now, I just got a four bedroom that rents out for about $1,000. So it's not as high as I wanted, but it was going vacant for a while. So I had to do it. And thankfully, I had Daisy. She helped me find a tenant. So that was amazing. So shout out to Daisy. But here's what we're doing today. We're looking at four bedroom single family homes. And we're going to go through the step by step process on how to analyze a deal to see whether or not it's a deal for you. All right. So let's take a look at this area. So I'm looking at four bedroom homes right now, up to 175 grand. And I'm only looking at single family homes. So I kind of came across this property right here, 516 20th Street. And you can see for the most part, it's not like the most modern house, but it's pretty much turnkey still. Like this is probably rent ready. The garage isn't going to be like a beautiful modern garage, but you don't really necessarily need that. It's got a great backyard and it looks relatively quiet and peaceful on the street. And Center Point is also one of the areas that's very high demand. So my goal is now to take these details and plug in a number so you can see how to analyze the deal. So let me plug in 169 right here first. 169, 900 for the purchase price. And for those you don't want to follow along, just go to affordablehousing.io. You want to copy the spreadsheet, go to affordablehousing.io, click on the Get Deal Analysis tool, plug your name, email, and phone number. That's the fastest way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet. Just go do that. Now, the next item, as we plug in the estimates, we're going to try to get two numbers to determine what our rent is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go right here. I'm going to plug in the address in affordablehousing.com. I'm going to go to the market rent estimator, plug in the address, plug in the bedroom count, and now you can see that the average rent for 25 units that are four bedroom plus is 1597. Great. Now, let me look up the HUD FMR. And HUD FMR stands for fair market rent. And this is typically how you find out the rent ceiling. So after you search HUD FMR, click on the top link in Google Drive, Google, and click on the next link in the FY 2025 small area FMRs. When you click here, you click your state, click your county, and now you're going to see the max rents by bedroom count, by zip code. This is 35215, 35215. And you're going to see right here that our max rent is 1650. However, 1650 would be incorrect in this scenario if you took 1650 as your rental assumptions because what's the market rent? It's 1567. So you have to take the lower of the two. Now, what commonly is misstated out there is people say, oh, this is my FMR, this is the rent I'm going to get, blah, 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 and take minus my mortgage insurance, taxes, etc., PITI, then that's my cash flow. But that's not the case. And that's because of the rent reasonableness test. Okay, for those of you don't know what the rent reasonableness test is, I'm gonna pull up the Housing Choice Voucher Program Guidebook. Now, Housing Choice Voucher is what was previously known as the Section 8 voucher. They rebranded from Section 8 to Housing Choice Voucher because of all the negative connotations that were out there, specifically about Section 8. So they rebranded. But if you go to this guidebook and you go to section 2.2 in comparability, right, you're going to see that here's a rent reasonableness test. In conducting rent reasonableness, the Public Housing Authority, PHA, must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent for other comparable unassisted units. So obviously, in determining comparability, the size unit type matters, right? So you got to compare single family homes against single family homes. In this scenario, I'm very confident these four bedroom properties are single family homes because it's very rare for people to build four bedroom apartments, right? And you kind of saw the area that we're in Center Point. This looks mostly like single family city. Okay. So that's why I'm comfortable using 1567 as my rentals estimate. So that's why I'm coming into B16 and plugging in 1567 right here. All right. For my renovations, let's go to my rehab calculator. I looked at the photos And I think for this property, I'm gonna put aside about $1,500 for the roof, just in case there's any repairs that need to get done. I've never bought a house that I haven't had to do anything on a roof, so that's why I'm putting that there. Now, the next thing is painting. I think the painting looks pretty good, but I'm gonna set aside $300 at 300 square feet for painting at $3 a square foot. So that gives me about $900 a budget. LVP, I think the floor actually looks fine. I'm not gonna put in any flooring updates here. Now for my bathrooms, they look fine as well. I don't need to do anything there. There are two bathrooms in this property. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace both of the toilets with high pressure flush toilets at about $450 each. The reason I do this is because I have high pressure assisted flush toilets at our properties, and I've never gotten a clogged toilet call before. So I want to keep it that way because I think a lot of people underestimate how much time and energy it takes when they get like a clogged toilet call. I mean, just imagine if you send someone out there, right? It'll probably cost you about $100 to $200 for a service call to send a plumber out there. And then if you replace the toilet afterwards, it'll probably cost you another 200 to 250. I would much rather get that fixed up front so I never have to face that call. That's my personal opinion. You don't have to do that, but I just want to do things up front and do it right in the beginning. So in row 92, I'm putting in one for the cage to block my HVAC, to to lock it up so that it doesn't get stolen. And that's because I've gotten it stolen before, and it is not fun. So I rather spend $100, I mean $900 on the cage, so that I don't get a $5,000, $8,000 units stolen from the property. So that's why I do. So I got a total rehab about 5 grand right now for this property. And let me go to B6. I'm gonna delete this multiple by three just because I was looking at a different scenario. Great. So now let me get my rest of my assumptions for my expenses. In row 28 and B28, let's get the tax estimate from Redfin. Tax estimate is $50. Easy, that's cheap. My home insurance is 132, so I'm gonna do equals 132 times 1.2. And right here in B29 for the insurance number, I'm multiplying it by 1.2 because I'm assuming that the original estimate of 132 was for a primary residence buyer. And if I buy it as an investment property, I have to assume that the insurance company is going to view it as a riskier asset because it's an investment property. All right. So that's why I multiply by 1.2 by adding a 20% premium. All right. In B32, I'm going to change my maintenance percentage to 10%. So this is 10% of my rents I set aside every single month for roof repairs, HVAC repairs. Because guess what? If you are a long term buy and hold investor, at some point in time, you know you're going to have to replace something. So it would be really irresponsible for you to not set aside money. Because if you don't set aside money, you are underestimating your expenses and you are overestimating your profitability. So be very, very wary of people out there that are teaching you, hey, here's my rent. It's FMR, not even talking about the rent reasonableness test. Here is my PITI, my principal, interest, tax, and insurance, and that's my cash flow. That couldn't be any further from the truth. I've seen people out there that says exactly that, and they'll say, I have no maintenance because I'm buying turnkey properties. But that's so not true. You know that roof is going to get replaced at some point, whether that's 15, 20, 30 years. All right. So don't be irresponsible. Make sure you put a good estimate in there. For HOA, there's no HOA on this property. I got 10% for my property management expenses. So a lot of people might want to self manage your property. That's great. So you can learn the ins and outs. But if you don't underwrite with property management expenses in the beginning, then you're going to be buying yourself a job. And I think a lot of people get into real estate because they want passive cash flow, right? But don't if you don't set aside money for property management expenses, then you'll never be able to hire out. And then because you never had margins. So be very mindful of that. Set aside money right now. And then for vacancy, people are going to move out of your home all the time. So you're going to have to calculate that there's going to be some empty months. So make sure you put in some vacancy expenses in here. All right. So let's keep going. For my down payment in F19, I got 25% in F19, so my down payment is going to equal to my B4 times my asking price. That gives me a total down payment of 42.75 grand. Got 3.5% for closing costs, and I got $5,000 for renovations. Great. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to my principal, and my financing amount is going to be equal to my B4, which is my asking price, minus my down payment percentage. That's $127,000. And right now, the interest rate is about 7.875. Great. So if I rent this property out, again, just writing down all these numbers here so you guys can see, we got a 4 bed, 3.5, 215. The FMR was 1650. Okay, just writing down these numbers because my partners already know how I analyze these deals. And my 2 mile radius, roughly, just rounding here, market rent is going to be 1567. 1567. The zip is 1467, 1467, 1461, and the county is going to be 1943. Great, 1943. So now that I got all these bedroom counts in here, it's a 4 bedroom, and I rent it out for 1567. My cash on this property is going to be $42, $43. My cash on cash return is 1%, and my purchase price is 169,900. My rehab is $5,000. 7.88% interest rate. That gives me a 1%. So that's not a great return if you think about it, right? So let's say your goal is to get a 8% cash on cash return on the deal to justify your investment, your time, your energy. Well, if I lower my asking price, all right, look at this. If I lower my asking price by X, what would it take to get to 8%? So if I go to 120 grand, great. Now I'm at 9.6%. If I go to 130, that's 7.4. I probably wanted to round a little bit better. So at 128, that would make the deal. So does that mean I'll get this deal when it's listed for 170, but I'm making an offer for 128? Not necessarily, but hey, the market's changing every single day. Someone might get a little needy, right? They might have to exit for different reasons. But now you know what your number is. Now I'm gonna do 2 more scenarios. Let's say your interest rates drop from 7.875 to 6.875. And this could happen, right? Because you could get news from, and I learned this through Housing Wire through a analyst called Logan Motoshami. And he talked about this concept of shadow Fed president, right? Where if Trump is going to put in a new Fed chair in about 8, 12 months from now. And he goes out to the market and say, like, hey, as soon as I get in office, I'm going to lower interest rates, right? So now bond traders can trade with a future anticipation of what's going to happen to interest rates. And then, so the 30-year mortgage rate is affected by two primary factors. One is the interest rate on a 10-year treasury yield, and the second is the spread between the 10-year treasury yield interest rate and the 30-year mortgage interest rates. Now, historically, that spread has been about 1.5 to 3%. I mean, 1.5 to 2%, but it's gone as high as 3%. I mean, it's gone as high as like high fives in the 1980s. So if you look at the chart, right? Let me pull up the chart and show you the relationship between the 10-year yield and the 30-year mortgage interest rates. This allows you to see, hey, look, the spread is about 2.5, 2.4, right? Now you see how this works. So now you got to pay attention, right? If all of a sudden we get better news, better predictability overnight, you can see that the spread gets narrow, and that can easily drive a half-point move overnight. And then if you have someone out there that's saying like, hey, I'm going to lower interest rates as soon as I get in, once they announce a new Fed chair, blah, 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 that can move another half a point. So what happens, right? If you get 6.88% for your interest rate, my cash and cash return number just jumped almost by 2 points. So what does this mean? Now I can afford to pay more for this property. Now I can pay it for 138, right? Assuming everything else stays constant, I can still get 1567 for my rent on a monthly basis. But now I'm cash flowing 287 a month, and that's a 7.8% return. And now, hey, your offer of 138 might be more likely to get accepted versus 128, right? Simply because you're tracking what's happening to interest rates overnight, right? 1 point just gave you a buying power of $10,000 more for the same property for the same rent. So that's why you got to understand all the different levers that you can pull to understand what's a deal. Okay. Now, I'll show you one more scenario. What if you get into the property and you estimate your rehab was 5 grand, but you start getting an inspection, you start realizing the plumbing's off, the sewer pipes off, blah, 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 and your rehab tripled, right? So I want to B6 and I multiply by 3. Now my rehab's 15 grand. Look what happened to my cash and cash return number. It dropped to 6.3. So if my return criteria is 8%, I probably have to lower my asking price again to 128. So even though my rehab tripled, I'm not getting emotional about it. I'm just adjusting the numbers as I see fit to meet the criteria. So I'm still going to get 1567, right? I'm not using 1650 because this is a more reasonable rent according to the rent reasonable test we talked about earlier. And now it's still 7.8% return for the 128K purchase price with a $15,000 rehab. All right. So hopefully this helps everybody. My goal with this, again, this is not investment advice. Wasn't trying to show you, wasn't trying to solicit any investments on this call. I'm just simply showing you how to look at a deal, adjust the numbers appropriately, and ultimately figure out what's a deal for you because the deal for you might not be a deal for somebody else, right? There are some people that would buy properties in Southern California for appreciation. Now that's very risky, it's speculative, but to each their own, right? If they buy $1 million property and Southern California has been still going up 5% every single year, well, that's $50,000 if you buy $1 million property. So they might not care about one, two, $300 of cash flow a month, right? It's a whole different strategy. And that's not to say you can't have a balance of both. So this is my goal, right? Again, I hope you go to affordablehousing.io today, get a copy of the spreadsheet, do this alongside with me. You can analyze the same deal using the same spreadsheet, right? Just copy out loud. Sometimes it's so hard for you to take that first step, but I'm learning how to just tell you, just copy my homework. That's the best way to do it. Because at some point, someone's going to ask you, hey, why do you think this is a deal? And you can say that I know this is a deal because I've been looking at properties for the past 674 days. Might that give you some confidence that you know what you're doing? All right. All right. I hope you all have an amazing Saturday. Hope you all spend some quality time. Hi, Soleil. Hope you all spend some quality time with your family and friends today because that's what I'm about to do. It's a moving day for me, but I'm still going live. Stay consistent with me. Analyze these deals with me. And DM me anytime at Fai He on Instagram or LinkedIn if you guys have any questions. But hey, I appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much for caring about affordable housing. If it wasn't for people like you, I would have never had the home I grew up in. So I appreciate you all so much. Let's learn together. Let's build together. I'll see y'all tomorrow for day 675 days of going live in a row. Have a good one, everybody.